Hello, my name is Trine Falch. I'm a theatre maker from Norway. I'm here with a theatre company called Susi Wang and our show Burnt Toast.
Great. Hi, my name is Andrea Capra. I am a freshly minted professor here at NYU. I work on horror. I teach currently 2 classes on horror, an undergraduate seminar and a graduate seminar, and I have a forthcoming book on the topic, so very excited to talk with you about it. Before we began filming this, we were both joking about the fact that none of us is a native speaker of the English language, right? And so, there is always this kind of semi-horrified, but also fascinating approach that we have with a language that is foreign to us, but a language that we have to inhabit, be it only for having this conversation, right? To me, it's interesting how horror and language are rarely connected, but they may be indeed, a lot to be said there. I don't know if you also kind of experience the same connection.
Yeah, well, sometimes, of course, this there is a space between what I'm thinking and what comes out in a different language, and it might feel horrific sometimes. Well, I'm a Norwegian and I mostly write in English because, Norway was part, or we won the war, the Second World War, and since then we were victims of the soft power of the United States. We had a lot of financial help to build up the country, but also a lot of culture. So that was the soft power that the United States bombarded us with. So my whole childhood was full of Western movies.
In English.
In American English, and American music, American films, American stars.
Right.
So when I started to work on fiction, which is quite new to me actually, it was English that came out. And that is and I think also many other Norwegians, fantasy language, and it's a bit like children in role plays. They often choose another dialect, at least in Norway, to get into the fiction or the game, the play, and I think for me it feels liberating to speak with myself or to write in English, and I also get better contact with my fantasy and with the darker sides.
The darker side of your fantasy.
Because also I saw a lot of, not horror movies, but I mean Tarzan movies and John Wayne movies, and they were full of blood and violence, and American English is also the language of violence. Of course, television series, films, what have you.
No, that's true. That's interesting to grow up and be exposed to movies, TV series that are somewhat horrifying or have horrifying moments, and that is in English for the most part. Also because hopefully, I don't know about this, but hopefully you didn't really encounter in your real life, the horrors that you were seeing, in those movies and so on and so forth.
No, not at all. But like you being an Italian, I mean, they dubbed all the American movies.
Exactly, right. So my encounter with that horror on the screen was mostly through, the Italian language. I think that for, we both work in the arts from 2 very different perspectives. I'm a literary critic and a literary scholar. You create art yourself, and the language. We were talking about language also because language plays such a fundamental role in our craft, and yet there are those moments when language doesn't quite reach where you want language to reach, right?
All the time.
And one of my ways of thinking about horror is really about a feeling of powerlessness. Horror is about this kind of forced powerlessness. You want to do something and you cannot quite do that, right? You want to change a situation and you cannot do anything about it. And especially my first few years in the United States, maybe after I had a couple drinks too much, or I smoked a joint or something like that, there was always this moment of being unable to say exactly what I wanted, and I remember finding that really horrific. And I know that this term may be perhaps an exaggeration, but for someone who's so interested in language, such as myself as a literary scholar, the incapacity of making my language do the work that I wanted was really terrible.
And you came out as stupid or something.
Right,
I mean, when people don't speak properly, we judge them as less intelligent or something.
Exactly. I mean,
but what you're saying there with the horror within this thing that we want to change, but we cannot. We want to change ourselves. I think like the state of the world now.
Sure.
And we know in this Western or the rich part of the world, we know we had to change our ways of living, but we're not able to. I think this is one of the biggest horrors that we can all experience.
Yeah, it's almost as if we know that a catastrophe is bound to happen. And it's right in front of us, and it's about to just overwhelm us. And yet there is this generalized sense of impotence or powerlessness, almost. Right? It's kind of a civilizational horror, atmospheric horror, perhaps.
And we're fenced inside these routines, everyday routines. And we repeat them, and we repeat them, and we repeat them, and and we cannot change.
Right.
Although we know and we're told every day you have to change, you have to put the paper in that litter box and the blah 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 in this, and of course we can do that, but there's so many things that we know all the time that we are we are making harm. We are harming the planet.
Yeah, I mean, those acts that you're describing are also ways of making almost. I mean, they're not useless, but in part they're also a way of making believe that we can, meaningfully change the state of affairs, right?
Of course,
whereas the situation may be a little bit more complicated, perhaps horrifying. But so I feel like we get to the topic of horror from similar yet divergent perspectives. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about why horror? What fascinates you about this word or this genre? I mean, how do you think about horror?
Yeah, well, that's a great, a big question, and I cannot answer it. But somehow, I wasn't into horror at all being younger. But after my menopause, I get less annoyed about violence and the horror. And it felt liberating actually to move into this part of fiction where really horrible things are happening. I don't know why, but we have this. Susie Wang has our identity is very based on change. That we have changed from being former. Before we used to work with more like performance art, that part of theater, the post-dramatic theater, with no acting, no plots, no characters, no storyline. We were being ourselves, because that's the best you can be in Norway as a Protestant country. Being yourself is really the best.
That is the goal. That
is the goal. You can trust the person who is him or herself. So anyways, I tried to make a play, or to write a play, the first play, like a fiction thing about the Norwegian salmon industry, which is really horrible.
I can imagine.
Yeah, you shouldn't eat salmon. Anyway.
I had it for lunch.
Yeah, you did? All right.
Terrible.
Okay, so anyway, it was kind of obvious that this story should come out as a horror, I guess, somehow. But still, I found it so interesting to go into fiction, because it was like there is an inherent part of representational theater or fiction maybe itself there is something between the so-called original and the imitation of it. And in between there, maybe an abyss, I don't know what it is, but there is something is off with the theatrical representation.
Mm-hmm.
You can believe more in the film, I guess. A film is closer to reality. Theater is something else, and when you try to imitate life or to kind of bring some kind of realism, and especially with us coming from a performance art part of theater, I mean, it felt false or wrong or whatever,
false,
yeah.
Right.
But that was the that false,
uncanny.
yeah, uncanny, which I think uncanny is often a much better word than horror, because now I'm jumping forward, I think here, but I think that horror is very much based on tension and relief.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're so super tense, and then you get the relief, and the girl escapes, or the virgin escapes, or whatever.
Or maybe not.
Yeah, or maybe not. But there is a relief somehow, or it's a resolution. A resolution, is that the word? Yeah, in the end. But with the uncanny, there is something lurking.
You're staying with the trouble, right?
You're
the uncanny doesn't really go away. You can recognize something as uncanny, but very rarely there is a moment of resolution.
It is
right?
not that you don't get the answer, you don't get the resolution.
Yeah.
There's something lurking, and you don't even know if is this guy spooky, or is it
yourself?
Is it myself?
Mm-hmm.
Projecting these qualities. So I regret sometimes that we use the word horror, but and also like real horror fans, movie horror fans.
Sure, yeah.
They come to see our shows and they say, well, this isn't horror, because, well, yeah. But the theater audience, they are more thin-skinned, I think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, the word. I'm very interested in philosophy of language, right? And there, you know, you have to reckon with the fact that the word horror exists and it does some meaningful work, right? If I tell you, oh, you know, it was horrible when I had to put down my dog, you immediately understand how I'm using this word, right? If I tell you that I watched a horror movie, you know, you immediately kind of vaguely know what movie I watched, right? So it's a word that is well socialized. So perhaps that's why some people like to use it in relation to what they see, or you know, what they see also in, you know, what you create and so on and so forth. Not because it's necessarily what you're thinking about, not because you want to do, you know, a horror play, but because for them, you know, the experience of watching the play that you made is kind of socialized as a horror experience.
But the fact is that this play that we show here now, it's the last part of what we call a horror trilogy about human nature. So
yeah, I feel like you know, more than a trilogy is needed to speak about the horror of human nature.
But anyways, definitely. But I regret that afterwards. But anyways, we have to live with that now. And I mean, it wasn't just limited to that trilogy, of course, because all the plays we made are horror about human nature. I think we're especially interested in the body horror, maybe, or for me it's also very interesting that horror as a genre, like you show and materialize your inner pain or your inner fears, so so that you just shows it's getting physical.
Sure. Yeah, the horror genre can be a powerful genre to show, you know, also the underbelly of society, right? The flip side, you know, you lift up a stone and the stone on top is all clean and nice, and you lift it up and it's teeming with wasps and other insects, right? And I think that at times the horror genre does that. You know, it shows the darker side of you know, human nature, of our societies, right? That's why the horror genre can be very powerfully used to speak about matters of you know, societal concern, be it, you know, racism, violence. Today I was teaching a class about nuclear warfare, and there, of course, there is perhaps a very striking connection between the nuclear mushroom in its almost sublime aesthetics and the fact that it's also horrifying, right? I think that there is almost always something to be said about the horror of when something beautiful or good or interesting turns bad, and that moment when that switch happens tends to be powerfully horrifying. It's like the mother that becomes a murderer, or the deranged father, or the friend who betrays you, right? I think that horror lies in that moment or in that space when something changes, part of its nature and turns bad or rogue.
And especially things that
exactly.
especially familiar things.
Yeah.
And which is so super interesting with this old essay of Freud's, which is just like partly relevant, but anyhow, it's this word unheimlich that he used, which is translated into uncanny in English, but unheimlich means unhomely, so it's the word home and everything that has to do with home.
Sure, a sense of safety.
Yeah, the safety, and then the etymology of that word is so super interesting because it changes after. We are talking medieval times. It had to do with the homely stuff, the cozy stuff, and the safeness of the home. And then suddenly the word changed into meaning secret. We also have the same in Norwegian. So Norwegian and German is not so different. So then from meaning home, it turned into meaning secret. And then it turned into develop further until it meant terrible in a way, or scary, or frightening, disturbing,
disquieting.
And then they had to put the prefix unheimlich, because the word heimlich itself became a scary thing.
Sure.
So the home changed into something scary, and I think that when you think you know the world, or the things you have around you, and suddenly you see them in another light.
Yeah, no, that's a really disturbing moment, and you're also bringing up a lot of interestingly interconnected matters. The idea of home, of course, is also one of the ruling tropes of the horror genres, as in the haunted house, right? A place that should be comforting, welcoming, and so on and so forth, and that is revealed to be something else. But also, what you're talking about makes me think of the fact that the experience of horror in itself is also really a moment when your life, your world is cast into a state of crisis, right? You thought that you were safe. And suddenly you're not, right? You thought that you could meaningfully shape your future or the circumstances of your life, and then that ceases to be, right? Almost immediately, and there is that moment of reckoning with the fact that a shift has taken place, and instead of being agentful, you're powerless. That I think really speaks about the experiential magnitude of horror, right? Every time that we experience something horrifying, we have the impression that it's a very powerful experience. It's if you say that something horrible happened to you, you probably mean something really impactful. Or the word can be trivialized, right? I could say, oh, it was so horrible when I spilled my coffee on my white shirt, right? But of course, that's a trivialization of language. But in general, if I were to ask you, what are the horrible experiences, some of the most horrible experiences that you lived in your life, you probably wouldn't, tell me, that time when you missed the train, right? It's something definitely more impactful than that. And it's also something, that really speaks about the really pervasive and endemic nature of horror, right? Whenever I teach my classes on horror, it's really remarkable how every single person has something to say about the topic. Right? When I was writing my book on horror, and I would be, out doing whatever, right? I could be at the park, I could be, at the movies, after the movies, I could be at a bar. And people would ask me, so what are you writing about? And I would tell them, well, I'm writing a book on horror, on what it means to be horrified, right? And everyone has something to say about the topic. It's a quintessentially human experience,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so essential. Like the first time I understood that my mom and dad actually had sex to have me, that I was a result of this disgusting, dirty act between them. So I'm just a product of something that was for years horrible, and I still can't stand the thought of those two people in bed doing dirty stuff. So, I mean, the horror is everywhere.
Right, and, especially in the bedroom of the home, right?
Talk for yourself.
No, it's...
No, you're right, I guess, even if I'm alone in my bed.
Right.
With my dirty thoughts. I don't know. Yeah, anyway.
Do you have any favorite works of horror yourself? Of horror genre?
Let me see. It is this beautiful film about some very, very virgin-like girls, Picnic at Hanging Rock, it's called. But I can't remember the director, and I can't really explain to you why but it's about people getting lost in a way, and the relation between them and nature. It's a mountain, so I think horror is always lurking when people, human beings, meet nature, both our own, and the big thing. So also, no, I cannot say that one piece of work was a favorite. I like really stupid. What I don't like is this new trend of what they call elevated horror.
Yeah, art horror.
Yeah.
Why don't you like it?
Well, I like the honesty of horror to be, it doesn't need to be within the genre. It's always fun when you work with genre, to break it, of course.
Yes.
Which is the meaning of genre, I guess, to make some boundaries that you then break. But no, I don't know, it just annoys me that it tries to be, because I think horror doesn't need to show up, or show up is a wrong word, to show off.
Right,
yeah. To show off, because it's super interesting in itself. Anyways, yeah.
So there is no need to make horror more, refined.
Well, you can make
it.
Well, I didn't mean to say that either, because as you also point so wisely, is that horror is a part of everything around us and within us as well. So it's there all the time. So anyways.
One of my favorite horror movies of all time is I don't know if you watched it, Dario Argento's Suspiria.
Yeah. It's beautiful, but I think I will prefer the Profondo Rosso.
Good taste, good taste. No, I think that it's also, Suspiria is such a theatrical piece, right? There is something very camp about it. Also,
I didn't like the remake, though.
I haven't even watched the remake yet. But I promise myself every time to watch it, and I never do.
But the Italian giallo part, it's fantastic what was made in that period, and Argento being the master, I think, because it's so elegant, not so brutal, and the color of the blood in the giallo movies are fantastic. And this is a history of its own, how the color of the blood changes in the develops in the horror genre.
No, yes, and again, something that we encounter in our everyday life that can acquire this kind of artistic power when meaningfully placed at a specific moment of a movie with a twist, right? Because if you check out the blood of Dario Argento's movies, it's always very red. It's like shining. it's like so thick in a way that is so unnatural, and yet it's so striking. It's like a punch in the face, which is in some way what horror is, right? Horror, more than a punch in the face, perhaps, is a punch in the guts.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the skills of Dario Argento was also to kind of give this almost affective, immediate impression of the striking nature of horror, right? I mean, experiencing horror is definitely a striking experience, and his movies, even if they're over the top in some way and so on and so forth, kind of head in that direction in a way that I think that it's quite remarkable.
And the beauty of killing, and the beauty of horror that this Giallo made, so which is really on the edge. I think it's really edgy, this Giallo genre. Yeah, well, we could speak more about that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I think that this was a great conversation. Horror is such a rich topic. We could go on for a very long time, and horror, since it's so endemic in our world, can really be conjugated and analyzed from so many different perspectives, right?
In the world of survivances, it's often the female body is often the place where it happens, because the mystery of the female body is just so incredible, interesting, and the sex thing that has to do with reproduction, especially to us, is super interesting. So and the fact that a woman can hold several other persons within her. It's just endlessly fascinating, and how it can be stretched, and blah, blah.
And endlessly horrifying.
Endlessly
as well.
horrifying to ourselves also. The first time I discovered blood in my underwear, I remember it so well after having gym, or what is it called, training in school, and then there it was. And life would never be the same again.
There are those moments of initiation to the horror of ourselves that are also biologically conjugated, for sure.
And I think also this fact that our bodies are still moving in the pace of evolution, while our consciousness is so, we're going to the moon, we're going out in space, we're going...
Sure, there is a kind of a discorrelation.
Yeah, so it's kind of, we're doing the splits, I think, somehow between this and being a woman without being a mother. It has been a good life. I recommend it. But anyways, for many, many years, my body wanted to get pregnant.
Sure.
That was for sure.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Your mind was going in a direction and the body in a completely opposite direction.
And I was thinking, I guess this will give me cancer or something, because I'm not
doing what my body is asking me to do.
Yeah. So I'm out of balance somehow. And this out of balanceness is also very prominent in horror.
Yeah, no, the human body is indeed a source of horror. No coincidence that body horror is such a widespread popular genre, right? It's the human body is what we know best, because we don't go a single day without dealing with our own body, right? And precisely because of that, anything that affects, distorts, bends our body, I think it's particularly disturbing to us, because it really breaks that normalcy that we are so used to thinking about in relation to our own body. And yet, as you point out, the normal functions of our body are also a source of horror.
And lots of taboos still around.
And lots of taboos still.
Going to the toilet is a horrible thing every day. But also now like here in Manhattan, which is just incredible, different it's very also horror in a way, because I have this notion that I've been here before, because I've seen it in so many
Sure,
movies
yeah.
and television. So but I have been here once though, and but all these women I see in the streets that have rearranged their faces to hide their age.
Right.
And it makes this uncanniness. You can't really point out what is wrong with the face, but there's just something off with it. And more and more faces like that are appearing around us now, and I find that also scary and very sad. But that's another.
Yeah, that's a topic for another conversation.
Yeah.
But it was lovely to chat with you.
Yeah,
and
likewise.
I look forward to seeing your
I
piece.
hope you will come and see the piece,
Yeah,
of course.
for sure.
But I understand that you're a very busy
Yeah, well,
man.
it's never a dull moment at NYU, right?
No, I can imagine. Lucky you,
Great.
in a way.